Hello, Rachel.
Hi, Ryan.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm feeling imperial.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, I'm feeling like I'm wanting to
Don
dominate.
A crown?
Yeah, that too, actually. Don a crown and dominate. Nothing says those things like yum yum.
Yeah.
Yum yum's kind of like the phrase that you know, it's a phrase that you can use to describe anything. Such as that, feeling imperial and wanting to wear a crown. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling similar. Like, you know, I just want to hang out with my friend Carl.
Yeah, oh.
Read the newspaper.
My favorite cast member of CSI, yeah, Carl. So, Rachel, we are the Yum Yum podcast because of the iconic line of dialogue from Star Trek Discovery, which is a show we are discussing.
Bless Commander Nan.
Ah, Nan D, when will she return to our crew? When will she grace our screens again? That is the biggest crime of Season 3. Not the burn, being a guy who screamed real loud, but Nan leaving.
Absolutely.
So we're rewatching Star Trek Discovery, Rachel. That is the format. We're giving our opinions.
I am familiar with that.
But I'm making sure everyone's familiar with it. Everyone, including some guests that we've got on for this one, Rachel. That's right. We stretched out our hand and we got some fellow Star Trek podcast people who are brave enough to talk about Terra Firma Part 1. We got some friends that we actually did a podcast with on their show a little while back, Starfleet Underground. Hello, fellas.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing? And I have to say, I had no idea you guys wind up perfecting the transwarp transporter. I mean, one instance I'm in my cabin and the next you got us here. That was a pretty wild ride, so thank you.
No problem. So
you could have warned me. I was in my knickers.
Oh, well, that's how we wanted you, though. We wanted the full experience. So, please introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about your show.
Well, I'm Patrick. I'm number one. I'm also the computer guy, and I'm also the foreign species liaison.
And my name is Captain Nathan Adams aboard our wonderful vessel here, Starfleet Underground. I tried to lead the crew down the correct pathway, but we get in constant trouble with HR. So there was a lot of stuff going on. We finally made a deal that they don't listen to us. And our podcast is not for children. So, but I understand you guys are, so we'll make sure that we'll keep all that naughty bits out.
Previously on
The Yum Yum podcast.
And all of it, and the seeds spreading out everywhere like my cum. And
So you guys are Star Trek podcast. What kind of stuff do you cover? Do you focus on a specific series? Are you like us and you rewatch stuff? Like, what do you guys talk about generally in the Star Trek world?
Normally, we first got started when Discovery first came on. That was our thing for our podcast. That was the birth of our podcast, was for Star Trek Discovery. And since then, we've kind of chased every new series that's been out. So we've reviewed Discovery, we reviewed Picard, we reviewed Starfleet Underground. And as much as we love the show, go ahead.
Starfleet Underground.
Starfleet. No, I meant Starfleet.
You meant
the
Lower
other
Deck.
one, correct me. Thank you. Starfleet Lower Decks.
Review your own podcast.
No,
as a
my
Star Trek
my favorite
TV
episodes
series.
are when they review their own episodes and go, no, that was a great point that Patrick brought up. And Patrick's the one that said that comment. So I'm really glad that he brought up a great point back in the episodes of yesteryear.
He does do that because he starts off with what happened was. So
What happened was.
Yeah, and I think at the moment you guys, because there are currently no new Star Treks on at the moment, we're in the interim where we will get a plethora of them, but who knows when, because the world is a crazy nonsense time. You guys seem to be covering Star Trek Enterprise, I guess before Discovery, what was the latest Star Trek series?
Much to the chagrin of our science officer.
she hates the song, so we thought this would be the best series to torture every episode, is the beginning of that song. But she's beginning to find out what a lot of people did when they first started to watch Enterprise, that as the season progresses, the show actually gets better.
Yeah, it finds its identity, and then it gives Archer a terrible haircut and remixes the song, so it goes in different directions. So yeah, you guys, I really enjoy your stuff. Like, when we talk about Star Trek Discovery, we like to look at it in a rewatch capacity, but I like listening to other people who are experiencing it for the first time and going through it and kind of anticipating the next episodes and what the future will hold in the series and all of that. I personally don't like doing that myself because I feel like I've been burned too many times, not just with Star Trek, but in general of like anticipating things to go well by the end of the season or series. So
it'll make sense later.
It will make sense later. Trust the mystery. So I personally like when I like to talk about these things in like a reviewing format. I like to kind of revisit them and see how do they hold up on the second viewing of everything, because it's an interesting little world to behold, especially with a show like Star Trek Discovery, which we will be talking about, in which the whole season depends on like a big mystery reveal at the end of it. And usually when you reveal a big mystery, it's like, well, did the whole thing hold up when you rewatch it? Or is it one of those things where it's great when you're watching it and you don't know where everything's going to go, and then you get to the end and you're like, yeah, that was fun, and you move on to the next thing. And it seems like people are very divided on whether Star Trek Discovery is that type of show or not. I think it kind of depends on the season, honestly.
I tend to be lucky because I always forget what I watched. So when I rewatch it, it's like I'm watching it again for the first time. So
yeah, I'm cursed with memory. I'm like, oh, I remember that in the first season, Emperor Georgiou was heralded for keeping prisoners alive and torturing them for months on end, and that it was a sign of absolute terror that she did that and not killed them. But that's me remembering things. See, like, I wish I could be like that a little bit with some of these shows where I'm like, I wish I could go in blind again, but I just can't help but remember details because I'm just an analytical type of person when I watch these things, even for the first time. I'm just like watching them with very, very specific mindset, like with most TV shows, especially with a mystery show like this, where you're like, okay, all the details, are they all going to add up? Where's it all going to go? All of that. But, we have you guys on for Terra Firma Part 1. So how about one of you guys tell us, Patrick, perhaps, if you could tell us what the plot of Terra Firma Part 1 is according to IMDb.
Well, let's see. Terra Firma Part 1 originally aired December 10th, 2020, and it is the U.S. Discovery crew journey to a mysterious planet in hopes of finding a cure for Georgiou's deteriorating condition. Stamets and Adira make a stunning breakthrough with the newly acquired burn data.
No, wait, you forgot to reinitiate.
No, I didn't.
You paused the algorithm when you put in a new storage array. You need to restart it again. See? Right here.
We're rewatching this. What did you think of this episode the first time round, and how is it feeling on this revisit, sorry?
The first watch, it enraged me. And on the second watch, I thought it was okay.
So it got better for you?
Yep.
You didn't like it
what
the first
enraged
time.
you?
Yeah, what didn't you like about it? What made you enraged?
The main thing is that they are still doing this. I still recognize this on the rewatch, to make it okay that Georgiou is a dictator and just be like, oh, you know what? She helped everybody out. She's not that bad of a person.
You're not a Georgiou fan.
We should be sad that she's leaving, and we should be sad that this murderer is dying in a horrific way when she has probably killed more people
than any other Star Trek character?
No. Then she has atoms that are being torn apart.
Yeah, torn apart
in this universe.
Yeah, I don't know that anyone on Discovery is really sad that she's leaving. I mean, they're I think maybe Michael, but
yeah,
like Saru's just like, whatever, bitch, get off the ship.
Tilly gave her a big hug and was like, we're friends.
Like,
we've never interacted, but we're friends.
You have helped me, and Saru is just like, I've
learned from you.
I've never had to really argue from you, but somehow I've learned more from you than Prime Universe Georgiou.
Yeah.
That saved me from my dead-end world and introduced me to Starfleet.
Rachel.
But you taught me more.
Rachel, so you did not like this episode the first time around because you still kind of have some reservations because you aren't on board for the redemption arc of Space Hitler.
No.
Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
that's
Space
correct.
Hitler.
That's understandable. When I first viewed this episode, because here's the thing, we did not watch this week to week, we batched them, so we watched them back to back, the two parts. So it's kind of hard for me to separate how I felt about them the first time round as like individual episodes, but my big takeaway was the same thing. I'm not really buying this, I didn't really buy this redemption arc kind of, oh, let's feel sorry for Giorgio. I'm not really comfortable with the idea of her level of evil, like where she's exterminated whole species because of racial prejudice to get a happy redemption arc. But my other big problem was I looked at this and I remember thinking, this is a two-parter? I felt like this did not need to be two
That was
parts.
a big complaint of yours. And I think there was also that thing of we always knew that Giorgio was going to leave in some fashion.
Because she has her own show that's seemingly not getting made right now, but maybe it will one day.
It's on hold. It's on hold.
Yeah, that was another thing too of like when I watched this, I was like, oh, so this is the story in which Giorgio leaves the show because she has to be the lead of her own show with Ash Tyler, perhaps. And I thought I was kind of just infuriated because I thought this halted. I thought the pacing of the season halted a bit here, where you've been building up, and I also got a bit mad because I thought out of all the stories that deserved more than one part, the unification idea should have been more than one part to me, not Giorgio's fun times in the Mirrorverse. So that's how I felt the first time. This time around watching it, I didn't mind it. I didn't mind this part, at least. I didn't love it. There were things I had issues with. I still hold dear to the fact that this did not need to be two parts.
Yeah.
If I enjoyed this episode primarily like Patrick in a way in which if I forgot that Giorgio's character was set up the way she was,
basically the way that
then I
watched
enjoyed this enough. If I thought of her as a Garrick type instead of a Gul Dukat type, then I enjoyed this episode far more.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the merit of the episode. That's just me being like, if I forget that Giorgio isn't Space Hitler, then I enjoy this episode.
If I just accept it and move on, it doesn't enrage me, was my experience.
I enjoyed it too because I don't like Giorgio as a comedy character. I don't find her jokes particularly that funny. And this episode had some, but it felt like we've had a plethora of episodes with her, so it felt like the least amount of quips and gags from her in quite some time. So I kind of got to enjoy her character a little bit more as an actual character than the one who does the gag at the end of the scene character.
We don't call them gags in America. We don't call them gags. We call that shade.
Preparing to meet an army down there?
One can hope. Those who I will take with me in battle will be my servants in the afterlife.
So what was your feelings on this episode the first time round, Nathan?
Well, when I watch a show for the second time, I am a background looker. I try to pick up things that I might not have picked up before, breadcrumbs and stuff.
Yeah.
And there's so much going on the first time I watched. I didn't pick up a lot of the little things, like with the newspaper, the title on the newspaper, and I was consumed on who the hell that guy was. You know, it's like, who is he? What could he be? Why is he there? Is he a Q? Is he a this? Is he a that? So watching it the second time, you get a chance to, for me, I get a chance to pick up more the nuances of the characters and the body language. I'm really big on body language, and to see like the little nods when they were giving the show, like how great Giorgio is. She urinates gold, and let's show everybody. And how, you know, you could see when he was looking at Burnham, and how she gave just the slightest head nod to what's his face to let him know, yeah, it's on, killer.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, there's little details like that, especially when we get to the mirror universe section of this, in which it really does feel like they had a lot of fun and a lot of zany stuff going on. What about you, Patrick? What did you think of this the first time around, and how does it hold up for you on the rewatch? Even though you say everything's kind of new to you, how was it for you?
Well, I just remember the first time, trying to figure out, like, what the hell's going on with her, with Georgiou, and why, her body's coming apart. But then when they get down to Danis 5, and all of a sudden Carl appears, like, I almost crapped my pants. I was like, oh my God! I'm like, I'm thinking back to old Star Trek and what this could possibly be. Could this be original series? Could this be next gen? So it was very exciting. But then, like Nathan again, when you watch it the second time, you pick up little things that you didn't necessarily see for the first time, like the name of the newspaper, the Star Dispatch, and then I kind of like to look at other things and find out who characters are, like what's her name, Dr. Issa of the Kiev.
Yeah,
she was played by Sarana, the actress who played Sarana, Saru's sister.
Yeah.
So I like to go back and like find those little kind of bits of information to flesh things out for me.
Yeah, I like to do that too. And see, but I also get frustrated. And well, how about I ask this? Because you guys may be able to clarify this. It's been a little while, so my memory's a little bit foggy, and I imagine yours may be too. But could you clarify for me, when she goes through this door into the mirror universe, how do you interpret this? Is this her literally traveling back in time to the mirror universe, or is this kind of like a Christmas Carol type of deal? What did you take away from this?
Well, there was actually Michelle Yeoh was just on the Pod Directive, which is the official Star Trek podcast, and she was saying that the door going back to the mirror universe is basically a judge, and whether she's worthy of having a second chance. So for me, it sent her back to, her own time and her own universe. So it was a time travel. It was also a dimension jump.
Yeah, but does that mean the events that she's done in that universe have altered the timeline, or is it just a non-thing?
That's going to be really interesting to see, because whenever you start messing with time, it really goes kind of nuts. Because if she messed with it too much, if you want to be a real time purist, is that all of a sudden Michael would have disappeared.
Yeah, and she wouldn't be in the Prime universe because she's dead.
No, exactly.
And none of the events from the end of season 1 make any sense then, because Prime Lorca's still, Mirror Lorca's still out there in our universe. He'll come back to the Mirror universe and just rule it and win. That's what, if that's what this is, because I was just curious of what you guys thought of it, because for me, I personally look at it as a Christmas Carol type of deal. I don't think because for me, if it is, she's gone back to her own timeline in the Mirror universe and she's fiddled around with it, then there are some issues within this that, for me, don't line up with what the continuity of season 1 put there. And that is, several factors. If we're going to go with this as a time travel thing, there are several factors for continuity things. Obviously, there's been many different change of hands of showrunners, and sometimes these details get forgotten. But there are little things that if this is, she's traveled back to her past, there are things that before she's traveled back that have been set up that don't quite line up with what season 1 presented. So that's why I like to go with a Christmas Carol type of deal, which is like a fantastical version.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Carl would have known, being who Carl is, he would have known, what her going back there meant for the timeline. And because it's in the mirror universe, it wouldn't necessarily affect everything in this Prime universe.
But it does affect it because we have crossed over with it at some point. That's what but even within the mirror, there's some continuity things that I question if it is a direct, she's traveled back in time. That's why for me, and that's the thing, they leave it vague enough because we know what Carl is. In the original series, he's just a time travel thing, but they've messed around with the Guardian of Forever's abilities in the animated series, and I'm sure in books and whatever, so it's not consistent with him as a device. Rachel, what do you think?
So for me, it was a bit of both. So it was definitely time travel and definitely a dimension jump. But I kind of explained it away for myself by saying, well, it's just branching universe kind of thing where she's made a different decision. So she's created a new path and a new parallel universe to the mirror universe.
Like Avengers Endgame style.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can buy that a little bit more because, see...
Because that's the way that I think of parallel universes.
Yeah, I rather it be something like that than if it is just a direct time travel she's fiddled around, because my brain, like you guys, I like to notice details too. And on rewatches, I notice details from the first season. I'm like, well, in the third season, that contradicts what it said in the first season, and then it makes me a bit cranky. But since by design, I've met several people who see this whole her going back in many differing ways, and I think this is one of the few times in which I'll praise Star Trek Discovery for being a little bit vague on how the mechanics of this work. Because if it just did state she traveled back in time and did all of this shit, it would just drastically change not just the mirror timeline but our own timeline within the show. And it's just like all these time travel stuff, all these parallel dimension stuff, it's a lot of information to take down in a season that really doesn't have any interest in any of that. The second season had far more of an interest in time travel. The first season had far more of an interest in a mirror universe thing. This season isn't focusing on all of those, so if it does plonk it in there in these double-parters, it kind of feels like, well, this is a lot of information to take in for just 2 episodes.
Obviously, we all know that the portal is to weigh you, and really is to see if you deserve a second chance. And I think in life, that's what we all hope, that if we do something wrong, do something bad, we hope there is redemption and we will be given a second chance.
So let's start off with a question I've got for you guys, which is, Adira and Paul have a story kind of in here.
The plot synopsis said so.
The plot synopsis said so, in which I can't even remember. What did they do? They just chatted briefly, right? They were like,
Adira was doing an algorithm, clean up the noise from the transmission from the nebula,
right?
And Stamets saw that she hadn't reinitialized it, and then he was like, "Okay, what's going on with you? Why are you upset?" She's like, "It's okay if you're gonna be, mad at Gray for not being here." So it's a father-child dynamic that's happening.
Yeah,
at least for me anyway.
And do you find that the season did a satisfying enough job developing that dynamic throughout it?
I think so. I mean, being that it wasn't a major, point in the storyline, I think they did give us enough.
I think the way they brought Indira in, the way they brought they in was really interesting, because they couldn't figure out why they had such extensive knowledge and why they were such a genius. But if you look at it as having a Trill symbiote, is like they have the combined knowledge of everybody, but yet didn't have the much emotional maturity to handle all of those things.
Well,
and
plus
so
being
I think
human with a Trill.
Right. And Stamets comes along. It was a good little way to have Stamets recover his humanity with all the stuff that he's going through and not to be so snooty.
Yeah, Adira is just one of those characters that we've talked about several times on the show. We just have a hard time understanding what about them has been necessary to add to this season. Who are they? What are they about? And what do they offer to this already large cast of characters that we barely get to spend enough time with? There are whole stretches in which Adira just doesn't even show up. And then there are whole stretches now where Gray isn't even in the show. And I just think to myself, like, I've watched the season, I'm rewatching it, and I'm rewatching it with a keen eye of trying to pick up who Adira's character is. And outside of the base knowledge of Adira is a Trill, carrying
has a
symbiote, and has a dead ghost lover, and is a tween genius, as they keep saying. I don't really know much about their character, and I don't know much about their character to understand why Paul Stamets, a very prickly person, is so enamored by them. And this whole father-child dynamic that's been building throughout the season, the first time I watched it, when it arrived at the very end of the season, it's like Hugh and Paul are like, "We adopt you, you're our child." it felt so weird to me because I was like, okay, is this a thing that they've been building towards? Rewatching it, I've been noticing that they have been building towards it, but
It's
I just don't.
subtle.
But I still struggle to know who Adira is and why Paul wants to hang out with Adira.
Now, let's say you are out somewhere and you are teaching a class and you come across somebody that kind of reminds you of you, and you see the growth that they're going through. You're going to develop a natural affinity towards them because you have a natural affection to how you were. So when they see somebody who's socially awkward, that didn't know what to do or how to do it, and they're basically smart and made fun of, they develop that relationship a lot easier than it would have been with somebody who let's say, who's like a Butch the Rock type of person. It's like, can you smell what the Rock is fixing? They wouldn't quite get it that way.
Yeah, the Rock who starred in Star Trek Voyager, let's never forget.
You're no bigger than a Tarkanian field mouse. Pank's insulting me by putting you in the pit to face me.
I must warn you, I possess superior strength.
I'm trembling.
With Stamets being an openly gay character, and then Adira being, trans, being they, he sees the struggle that him as a gay person has gone through, and the struggle that trans people go through, and so he feels that kinship.
I get that from look. I get that from a real world context of a modern day perspective context. But watching Star Trek Discovery and remembering it's a Star Trek show, never throughout the journey of Star Trek and Star Trek Discovery did I ever get the inkling that Paul Stamets' homosexuality was ever a huge struggle for him. Because it's a Star Trek world, right, where none of that matters. It's like everything's
I agree.
Happy,
I agree with
go
you
lucky.
to that. But it's the weirdness part of it. He may not have been ostracized for it, but the fact that he was typically a boy genius, that part of it, I think, is what he identifies with.
It's more that he's an asshole.
Oh, yeah,
that too.
And Adira can be a bit of an asshole when
well,
they're
that's why
going
him and
after
Reno-
what they want.
Well, that's how come him and Reno get along so well.
Yeah.
Well, not so much.
Plus, we don't get to see Paul growing up. We see him as an adult.
Yeah.
And so, as an adult, he's come to terms with and most likely dealt with, the issues that he faced growing up as a gay kid and as a nerdy gay kid. But yeah, so he's a different person now, but he can still relate to the struggle that Adira is going through with trying to find out who they are, because it's a very difficult process when you're a gay person or a trans person in a heterosexual world, trying to figure out how you fit into that and be okay with it, because at least in the 21st centuries, you're told that you're wrong, you're going to hell, it's a sin, blah blah blah. You can be killed for who you are. So there's that whole struggle, and hopefully by the time we meet Stamets, he's resolved all those issues for himself.
My biggest complaint is I wish Adira and Paul was on screen more often. There have been many times in the past few episodes in which it's like they walk in and they go, "Hey, we figured this whole thing out off screen," and I'm like, I would have liked to have seen that on screen to see a story and to see you bond.
So you want to see more of the character development with the both of them together, rather than it being assumed that it happened behind the scene type of thing.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, yeah, that I can get that. I understand.
You're tired. You haven't slept. You're angry with Gray.
I'm not angry.
It's okay to miss him.
I don't miss him.
This double-parter, Terra Firma Part 1 and 2, serves as the exit for Georgiou from this show to hopefully star in her own show. I want to ask, outside of if you like her character or not, did Georgiou need to be in this season of Discovery?
Well, she wasn't in there that often or that much towards that part. They started to concentrate, if I remember correctly, on others until she started doing the freaky, we found a new software special effects, let's make her face weird. So yeah, I guess they wanted to set her up kind of like for her new show coming up, because whenever they concentrate on a primary character like that, It's because they're getting ready to give him a send-off.
Then why not just leave her behind and do a similar goodbye as they did with Spock?
Or Nan.
Well, I think Giorgio has a bigger presence, though.
Yeah.
She has a bigger presence. She's a bigger character than Narn was. So it's.
But we care more about Spock than we care about Giorgio.
Because he's someone we know.
Yeah.
That's the
Well,
difference.
they wouldn't be able to do like, look, we have this evil Hitler woman, and we gave her a puppy, and now she's good.
No, it's true, but but wouldn't that be what Section 31 the show would do as a show? Because that's the thing too of I don't know what they're going to do with her character in that show if she's already done her little redemption arc in this show.
Well, maybe they needed a buy-in. I don't know the mind of the writers, but maybe they need some people who would be completely turned off by Giorgio. Says, I'm not going to watch it because she's a B. I'm not going to even pay attention to her. But it's like, oh, wait, maybe she isn't all that bad. So, yeah, let me watch it. When you get the other people's like, I love her being a B. They better not change her so much. Now you get both people buying in and want to see the show.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, it does. I just struggle with... See, I'm very much focusing when I'm looking at this of a time management and character focus. Because we introduce Adira. We have Adira, we give Adira one big episode, and then they're not in the show for 3 episodes in a row. And in those episodes, we're going to focus on Giorgio. Giorgio's here helping Michael save Book, or Giorgio's here talking smack to Hugh. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I know Giorgio's been here since the very beginning, but all of this is going to serve to basically what is 10 episodes setting up her just leaving this show to star in her own show, rather than giving time to characters like Book, like Adira, like Admiral Vance, who are new characters, or even Osira. God, I mean, I don't like Osira, but like I still feel like if you gave her some time, I could grow to understand what she's about. But like, we're focusing on like, and let's say goodbye so that this woman can have her own TV show, which is a very meta reason within this narrative, which most people who watch this show aren't knowing all the production stuff that's going on behind the scenes like we do, who analyze it and talk about it. Like my father, who watches this show, who's a 60-year-old man, he doesn't know that she's getting her own show. He's just in there going, okay, but why was she here the whole season if they just got rid of her?
Well, like my dad used to tell me, he's like, don't think about it, just enjoy the show. Because my dad was very analytical when he watched sci-fi, and because he would do the same thing. He something would take him out of the fantasy of the show, and he'd be like, But he would always tell me, he's like, just don't think about it, just enjoy it.
I was similar. I had a friend one time, and Patrick knows this story. I have a very analytical mind, and so I was on Liberty. We went to go see Independence Day, and I started yelling and screaming at the screen. They had told me to turn my brain off because I was getting visibly upset and annoyed because you have an Air Force One takes off full throttle, White House gets destroyed, and the plane barely escapes because of the flames are licking behind the plane.
Yeah.
Then you have a woman who's in a car with her kid and a dog,
Yeah.
sees the fireball coming in a rearview mirror, has enough time to get out of the car, dodge through stalled cars, and kick open the door, and then call for the dog before the fireball comes. It's like, really?
I think the difference... Yeah, I see. I find it hard, though, because Star Trek Discovery, and you guys know this having been a Star Trek Discovery podcast and being on the internet, it demands that you think about this. Like, it's like, think about how clever we are. Think about how smart this show is. Aren't you curious about the mystery box? Aren't you curious about how we're going to pull off all these different disparate elements into the big payoff at the end? So, how can I turn my brain off to a show that's demanding that I have it on?
You got a good point on that. It's like, what makes the 3D handheld 3D printer work? So yeah, I get that. It's asking a lot because they know how we can get, and how if we watch a show and we watch it over and over again, we can analyze the daylights out of it.
Yeah.
And so I get that. So yeah, they're asking us to be smart, but also not pay attention.
No, you have to respect canon. You have to understand the timelines and what the different timelines were and what the different universes were and how they all work together. And you have to keep very meticulous track of who, when, where, and why. And we have people in the room in the writers' room whose sole job is to say, nope, can't do that.
To talk about some good stuff in this episode, because like I said, I did enjoy this a lot more the second time round. Saru, still great. Love that guy. Awesome. I still love him.
Saru has some teachable moments in here. So when Admiral Vance overrides his decision to, for them to take Giorgio to Danis 5, he's like, okay, so what happened here? And, and the Vance explains to him, he's like, I know this isn't what you would have decided, and then explains to him, why he did it, which gives Saru a lot to think about, because he still knew it being a captain. So, he doesn't know all the ins and outs and how to play the role as it were. So, when he tells him, if you had left her to die, the crew would have seen you differently.
Yeah.
And you would have seen yourself differently. So it's a very teachable moment. I really like that.
Yeah, I did too. And it's a really important lesson for leaders to learn in general, that you are kind of only as strong as your weakest person. And if you are not uplifting from the bottom and uplifting everybody, you don't get as much success and as much trust from those people who are there to support you and to help the whole crew work together to get to where they need to go.
I think many people said over the season, Saru is one of the most liked characters because he's the most Star Trek type character. He's the Spock, he's the Data, he's the analytical man who doesn't fully get the human condition, but he's slowly learning it. That is all true, but what I love about Saru is he is the most dynamic character to me. He's the one that has arcs that make sense to me. He learns, he grows, he changes in ways that make far more sense to me than some of the other characters. And to me, when I watch him in season 1 and I watch him in season 3, he's a different character, but I can track why he's changed. While Michael in this season, she's had this magical year away with Book off screen, and she's just told us several times, I'm different now, but she acts the same as she did before. But now she's like a little less like she's angry. A little bit more grumpy. But
I think hopefully in the next season we'll get to see some of the missing year, that Michael had, and that will fill in the gaps and explain what happened to her during that time. Hopefully, fingers crossed that we'll get that.
But does that help this season that relied on that missing year? Because that's my big complaint is I couldn't relate to Michael for 13 whole weeks of television because this magical year that happened off screen and we didn't get to hear much about it. Will it matter in a year or two's time if they did that to this season?
I'm pondering what you all are saying on that. I do think that on the next season they probably will revisit some of the time that she spent alone with Book, because I do want to see the stuff that supposedly had made her change, other than her hairstyle and the fact that she found someone to do braids in the future.
And that she shoots faster now.
Yeah, but there's a lot. When she came back, is being able to fit in a structured environment. That part I kind of liked, to see her
her struggle. Yeah,
right. The struggle to refit back into an environment of structure when she was used to being like by herself running around. But yeah, I'd like to see that as well, because I do think some of it may be the strength of the character. Like Doug Jones is just a phenomenal actor. Yeah. So they'll give him something and he'll make it work, and he'll make you believe it, where you'll sit and cry for no damn reason, because he's that good at putting and bringing a character to life. Where you have some people, they have trouble moving out of the box that's set for them.
Yeah, but my thing is, why I think Saru's a dynamic character is we see on screen the things that he learns from and changes and adapts from. While Michael, there are so many that happens off screen, and you just have to assume that maybe down the line they'll give us something. But with Saru,
we watch him go through Vahare. We watch him meet up with Giorgio in the short track.
We watched him fail as a captain when he had to take over for Lorca when he got kidnapped. We watched Saru learn and adapt and change, and that's why I think he's the best character in the show. I think we spend so much, when we spend time on Saru, it's not spending time making a joke or having a fun little time like we do with Tilly or Paul or even Michael, but every time we spend with Saru, it feels like we're building upon something here. It feels like we're going towards an arc. It feels like we're building up his character. It feels like we are building a momentum instead of having, oh, here's a scene where Giorgio mentions that Hugh is pansexual in the Mirrorverse. Isn't that a fun little trivia fact? Every scene with Saru, for the most part, I feel like I'm watching a character go through something. I'm watching them learn. That's why I agree. I like that Admiral Vance scene as well, in which Vance is teaching him this lesson, and you see Saru internalizing and thinking, I don't fully agree with this, but I should take this under consideration.
Dan, how did you feel with Culber and Stamets' relationship? Because they did show him dealing with the fact that people forgot him in the mushroom world, you know.
We've had problems with Hugh as a character in the past because the whole first season gave him no character, and then the second season relied on you caring so much about his character. Because in the first season, he just smiled and nodded a lot, and then he got his neck snapped. And I'll never forget that. I'll never forget the image of Star Trek Discovery saying, hey, here's our first gay couple, and then we've just brutally murdered one for fun.
Right.
I'll never forgive it. And then the second season was like, don't you care so much about Hugh as a character? No. I cared about the fact that you murdered him for no reason other than drama, but I don't know who he is. This third season, and we'll get into it later on, has given Hugh much, much better of a defined character. I agree. Him and Saru are probably the most compelling characters of this third season to me. Yep. But I wanted to just touch upon, with that Vance scene though, right? He teaches him this lesson. He internalizes it, he accepts it. And then later on in the show, in this episode, Saru says, hold on, I'm not going to give Vance this information yet until we've got a lot more to go on. And we learn as the show goes on, that's a big mistake, and he shouldn't have done that. How do you guys feel about that aspect of it?
I think he was saying he was still trying to process that first lesson from Vance and saying, okay, do I go with my instinct and do we tell him right away, or should I stop and consider this? So I think he's being thoughtful about it, and it turns out maybe that it's the wrong direction to go, but he's trying to give it the thought process that the lesson was teaching him.
He was overworking the equation. Is like that old joke, like, what do you sit on, eat with, and sleep in? And the answer is like, a chair, a fork, and your bed, where you get somebody. And I think that's what he was doing. He was overanalyzing what he should do. Yeah.
I sit here and I watched it and I just went, yeah, he's right. I just looked at it and went, yeah. He doesn't need to inform the Admiral straight away. He has very little to go on to think of it. And see, I think of my Star Trek brain. I think back to all of the storylines in which we've had so many different captains who didn't have to immediately phone Starfleet HQ to let them know all the details of everything going on until they actually had information
something
to deliver.
Report.
Yeah, and that's why I get frustrated with Saru in this season, because I love him as the captain. I've said from the beginning, I think he should have been captain from the beginning. I'm not a fan of the spinning captain's chair. Don't like it. Because he's a unique captain. He's one of the few that we've seen in which he's learning on the job. He doesn't have the experience, but he's capable. And moments like this, along with moments like Michael being told you were right to run off and save your boyfriend even though it fucked over the rest of the crew, there's moments like this that are planted throughout the season in which it just feels like, to me, the writers are setting Saru up to fail so that Michael can get the chair at the end of the season.
If Michael played that same move, the writers would have made it that was the right call.
Yeah, it was a logical call, but when Saru does it, it's like this air of, ooh, that was the wrong call then. I'm sitting here as an audience member who's watched Star Trek thinking, what's wrong with that call? And why is the Admiral going to scold him in the second part for doing that?
Let us wait until we have something more substantive to report.
Here's what I say. I have a Kelpian research vessel that crashed before the burn, and a captain who hasn't seen another Kelpian face since he got here. I wouldn't blame you if you were a little distracted.
We don't like Giorgio that much.
No.
This is the double parter saying, hey, don't you love this character? Aren't you going to miss her?
Yes, it is.
What do you like about Emperor Giorgio? Don't give us the what you hate. What do you like about this character?
I like the fact that she is capable and she has a can-do attitude when it comes to something. It's just something inspiring about anybody who has an intense self-worth and the self ability to do things without
Such
being
determination and
nation.
ferocity.
Bingo. That's what I admire. If she was like somebody that was in command, I probably would follow majority of her orders, except for the ones that were morally questionable. She's someone that you can look up and go, yeah, you're in trouble now because you made our CO pissed off.
Yeah,
we
we
had
kind of see that with Lorca as well.
Yeah.
We had a gunny sergeant in the service that looked like he came out of a recruiting poster. I mean, complete with the scar on his face and the kung fu grip. He was the type of person that if somebody said he went into the cave with a bear, we would have sat around and said, oh, damn, we got to go in and help that bear. And Giorgio would be that person.
I think for me, one, she's a strong woman, and it's always good to see a strong female character.
Love that.
On a show that doesn't rely on some man to come and save her. Which is a stereotype, obviously.
I mean, Saru comes in the second part, but okay.
Well, do we? Saru's genderless to me, so
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, Patrick, that the show betrayed that statement that you made.
Well, you're jumping ahead to a show that we're not supposed to have seen yet, so there you go.
I get it. In this episode, no man comes in. Yeah.
No, we are meant to have seen it because it's the rewatch.
Yeah, that's fair. But go on, Patrick. You were saying.
Okay, so but she's a strong female character. She takes no shit from anybody. She knows herself. Let me put it this way. She knows who she was, because in this episode we see that there have been changes throughout the season. We see there have been changes. So she knows who she was, and yet she's not adverse to making changes, whether she knows it or not. She has allowed humanity to seep into her, and I love her one-liners. I mean, because she cuts you to the quick, immediately.
I'll never forget her sperm line. What a great line that was, where she's like, "I'm dressed like a giant spermazoa." Yeah, great. Wonderful.
Well, who doesn't want to be a giant sperm? Come on.
I mean, no. You got me there. I was a sperm at one point. Rachel,
Well, that's technically incorrect, but we'll move on.
We'll technically move on. Rachel, come on, Giorgio. Yeah. We've talked smack about it, but let's talk some praise. What do you got? Do you got anything in that big bag of yours?
I don't know if I have anything different. I do agree that it is good to see a strong woman, and they make a point about how it is an issue that she lacks the emotional vulnerability, and how she uses like the aggressive side of her nature to kind of overcompensate for that and to cover up those things, because she still sees them as weaknesses, even though she's seen how it can be a strength.
Yeah.
But because of her upbringing and all of like the standards that she has for herself, that she can't overcome the conditioning that she has. And I think that that's a really interesting thing to explore.
Well, we know in the mirror universe that showing weakness or emotion will get you killed.
Yeah.
So she may be an emotional person. She may feel things very deeply, but because of who she is and where and the timeline that she's in, she has to block all that. She can't let that be seen, otherwise someone's going to kill her.
Just the fact that she went out and decided to adopt a child, which even if she did go to a garbage heap and picked a random child, that would still be viewed very much in the Terran world as an act of charity.
Is she? Yeah, I guess.
And that is part of why Mirror Universe Michael says, "You didn't do me a favor by pulling me.
You took
out
away
of
my
that
trash
world."
heap, which was a
And
favorite
she
line.
said, well, she said, I was king of that trash heap.
Yeah.
So I found that to be a strange thing to say.
One man's castle is another man's trash heap.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think Mirror Universe Michael's a bit of a loser.
Oh, yeah, I think
Look,
so.
As I said at the beginning, if I remove how this character was set up, and personally, I do not think they gave enough building blocks towards a redemption for a character of this level of evil. But for this episode, what I will say is her strength to me, what I enjoyed about it is, and it's kind of the opposite of what was said, but also ties in to what we've been saying, is I enjoyed seeing her be a weak, vulnerable character in this. Because to me, that stoicism, those quips, the I want to fight, and every phrase I say is either a sexual innuendo or just racist. Because I'm an evil, xenophobic dictator. I like seeing her actually question her own morality. I actually like seeing her be afraid and vulnerable and pathetic. Like, I actually like seeing her, like, at the end when she has to spare Michael, and how everyone around her treats it like what a pathetic act that was, and she's conflicted herself. I like that aspect. I don't think personally that the things have built up to this being earned, but when I watched it, knowing that she's also going to exit the show, I kind of wished, I personally wish that there was more building blocks to this moment, and I wish the character was set up differently, but I liked seeing Giorgio not be the joke character who is also there to kick people. Because that's my thing of, you have this bizarre character which is like, oh, in your crew of people who love ideals, you have a character who's a Nazi who kicks people. And it's like such a weird thing to have in there, and they've been so stoic the whole time. It's nice to see in this episode, she actually has remorse, she actually has a tender moment with Saru, the slave version of him. I like seeing that, and it reminded me of stuff I've seen in Star Trek before. Like, for instance, I think they should have set her up more as a Garak-type character than the Gul Dukat type character that they set her up as. Because Garak, for instance, he was a bad guy. He did nasty shit, but he wasn't like a guy who occupied a whole planet and ran death camps. So you could understand a redemption arc for him being possible in comparison to Gul Dukat, who, in DS9, they're like, look, he has a daughter. And it's like, doesn't that humanize him? And the show says, no, it doesn't actually. He's still a Nazi, a fascist, and a rapist, too. And with Giorgio, they set her up to be kind of too evil for me. But if I remove all of that from my brain and just watch this episode, I like seeing her drop this facade. And it allowed Michelle Yeoh to actually give a more dynamic performance than she has for the run of the show. Because to me, she hasn't been allowed, outside of when she played the original Giorgio, she hasn't really been allowed to hit a lot of the bigger beats that every other cast member has. She just gets to be the one who smirks, and that's kind of it.
I genuinely enjoyed the scene with Giorgio and Michael in the training room.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say about the training room scene is we get to see Giorgio, she's like, fight me! It's very much, there's this controlled character that is Giorgio, and here we see this emotion coming from her because she knows she's in trouble, and for her that is a very dangerous, unsure place.
Yeah, and she's not terrified of death.
No, she's Terra Firma.
Terra Firma! Terra Firma! Terra Firma!
I still think that this doesn't need to be a double-parter. I personally felt like the first 15 minutes should have been our universe, and then straight into the Mirrorverse and wrap this up, because although I enjoyed a lot of the Mirrorverse stuff in this episode, I did feel it dragged a little, and I felt like there were a few different points when it could have ended.
Yeah.
Like that scene there, that's where it could have ended. And then, no, this scene here, and where it did end for me, with like her being like, oh, and throw her in the, in the room where we're going to torture her some more, and then it just kind of like she just walks off screen, like sideways off the screen. I found that like maybe it's just the shot or the music beat. I found it a little bit like, oh, this is where you're going to end the episode? Okay.
But they needed to do that in order to have what they call is a cliffhanger in order to get people to watch next week.
They did, but they had a few scenes before that were great cliffhanger moments too. There was a scene where she was talking to Saru, and there was like, she put a sword in, and she's like, I'm going to do this my way, blah, 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 and then storms off, and I was like, okay, you're going to end it there? Oh no, you're going to keep going? Okay. I just felt like the pacing of it, once we got in the Mirrorverse, as much as it is fun, I love seeing the Mirrorverse, it's a fun time.
Some
but
of them around, so the confrontation with Michael happened before the scene with Saru, and then the scene with Saru is the capper for the end of the episode. And doubling down on, I will change this, that my fate is not determined, I am in control, and that kind of mandate from heaven kind of shit that she has in her head.
I don't know if this was intentional or not. I don't know if you guys have any things to say about this, but what's interesting is Giorgio, when we first met her, was a very, she was a dictator, she thought of things in a very militaristic point of view, and one of the reasons that she hated Lorca was that he was like this fanciful man who believed in fate and destiny and all this bullshit. To her, she's like, who cares about that? And in this, she speaks a lot more like how Lorca did in that first season, where it's like, it's my destiny, it's my fate, I believe that this can all be changed type of stuff. I don't know if you guys have anything to say about that, but I was just noticing that this time around, and maybe because also I was looking like, I was disappointed Lorca wasn't in these two-parters, but in either of these parts. But I was noticing like the way she was talking, like, oh, this sounds like season 1 Lorca, who was like, yeah, fate and destiny and all that kind of stuff. It's very interesting. I don't know if it was intentional, but I felt that at least.
Yeah, I think because they come from the same cloth, so to speak, and that being in that universe or that galaxy, and that's why I think that speech was so similar. It's kind of hard to undo years of basically post-traumatic stress disorder. For her being that way, this is the way she brought up, this is the way she was, this is how the thing is, to cross streams for a second.
This is how she views the world, and this is how she's had to respond every single other time she's been in these kind of situations.
Like, to cross fandoms here, this is the way. So that's how it is. But yet, even with that, it did show that the time she spent with Discovery, it had an impact on her.
Yeah, it did. I just, my struggle is, and we've all watched a great amount of Star Trek. One of the things that I always took away from Star Trek is people will make the joke, oh, the evil Emperor Groppler Zorn with his big laser is the enemy of the episode this week. To me, one of the most recurring themes of antagonism in the world of Star Trek is fascism. It's always been like, fascism is bad. From the very beginning, constantly hammering it in, fascism is a bad, bad thing. We should not accept it. We should not glorify it. We should not think it's fun or sexy. It's gross. It's evil. We can have people like Gul Dukat, who's a well-nuanced character, and we find him interesting, and you may agree with some of his points, but at the end of the day, the show still says he was a fascist, and that is bad. And I think, for me, I will never be able to relate to Giorgio because I have it ingrained in my brain from just watching Star Trek and from being a person of Polish heritage. Fascism is bad, but she is a fascist, and the show always treats it as, isn't that kind of cool? Because one of the things that disconnects me from liking this arc is there's never really any points up until now in which her actions were challenged. It was always like, hey, Giorgio, your violent method was actually the correct one. Like in season 3, episode 2, Far From Home, Saru's trying to deal with the cowboy guy with Starfleet diplomacy, but what wins at the end of the day is her violence. And
I get that, and I understand what you're saying, and I'm going to jump into your point a little bit. And coming from a strong military background, there's a thing we used to say all the time. The Bible says that the meek will inherit the earth, but I am a firm believer is that the meek will need a champion to fight for them. And there are times when I have to be the sword in the dark. It's not something I want to do or have to do, but it's necessary. And I think what they were trying to do with her is trying to show that there are times when diplomacy wouldn't work. And sometimes you need somebody who's going to go in and be that way.
Yeah.
And Saru being hit, like you said, his growth, when he stands her down, it's like either you're going to give me that or shoot me in the face. And
Well,
she
and
backed
again,
down.
Saru has lived this life of fear and oppression, you know. So for him standing up to somebody is a huge deal. Whereas Giorgio is the complete opposite. You know, I mean, if Giorgio had been, you know, in Saru's life and vice versa, both characters would be dead.
Yeah, and like I get her function of that, but I do wish that the show would challenge her more often than they did. This is the double part of that challenges that perspective, but throughout the whole show, she's racist. She's constantly bragging about how she's exterminated whole races of people. She's bragging about all of these fascist ideals.
Well, see, I see that more as a reminder of who she is. She's saying it to kind of remind herself, I'm this person. She doesn't like the fact that she's changing. So every time she feels changing and warm fuzzy, she's like, I wiped the whole world. How dare I feel fuzzy?
Yeah.
And nice and loved.
And that really makes sense with, was it, I can't remember which episode it was, but when they have that kind of ongoing quip gag thing about, I killed my mother. No, you didn't.
Yeah. I think it's just hard for me because I can understand all of that. But you set her up as worse than Hitler. And that's the thing. I'll never get past that is she is set up as the emperor who has exterminated whole races. And someone like Gul Dukat is considered to be a bad man. And I'm like, well, if Gul Dukat is on the rungs down from where Giorgio is, I guess he's a good guy. But no, he's a bad man. And that's the thing. I wish the show either introduced her level of evil to be less disgusting, to be honest. Because again, she's a Hitler type to begin with. She should have either been a Garrick type to me, or if they are going to have that, they should challenge and actually condemn her more often than they did, because many people look at Giorgio and they say, oh, she's funny, she's sexy, she does all the actions, she's super cool, she's a strong female character. And it's like, does a strong female character have to also be a Nazi, though? That's the thing.
So you're equating her to like maybe Khan?
Yeah, but Khan's a bad guy.
Yeah, but he also was charismatic, and a lot of people loved him to death.
But he is a bad guy. The movies, the show never, ever forgets that he is a guy who is a villain. He is a bad man.
Okay, I got it. Your statement right there just helped me solidify what your point is. Your point is that they put her in the, oh my God, what's in the box evil. And they turn around and get people, oh, even though she cut off the head of the pregnant wife, she's okay.
For Giorgio watching that, I think the thing that's important is she's watching her history and the history that's told of all the lands that she's conquered and the people that she's killed. And for Giorgio, as she is now in season 3, having spent all of this time with our crew on Discovery, and particularly her relationship with Burnham, it all rings a bit hollow now. It's not the celebration that it would have been back when she was still living in the mirror universe. This thing that should be celebratory is actually a measure of this person that she was that she doesn't quite connect with anymore. I think that's really cool to get to experience that.
I think it's time for, we have our show, in our show we have the Hughdar, in which we focus on Hugh Culber, the amazing character of Dr. Hugh Culber, and discuss what we noticed about him in this episode. And Rachel, what did you notice about Hugh in this? He was here.
He stands up to David Cronenberg.
I can't believe David Cronenberg's in this fucking show.
It's awesome. I love him with the Blade Runner glasses. He's so cool.
Just his normal glasses. Those are just his glasses. I mean, I don't know about you, Rachel, but although Hugh didn't get as much to do in this,
I enjoyed him in this episode.
I thought he had a great banter and rapport.
Really good presence
with David Cronenberg. We actually complained recently in one of our episodes that Giorgio and Hugh were in a scene together, and I think it was more the direction, but I didn't really feel like Michelle Yeoh and Wilson Cruz played off each other that well. I felt it was really awkward and kind of clunky. But David Cronenberg, someone who I still don't think as an actor, I think of as a director, him and Wilson Cruz really have a great back and forth, and I kind of want to see more scenes of them two together. They both
really did. They really did. I agree with you, and it shows you has some steel behind him now, whereas before I never got that. You never saw his strength. And now you saw he's like, I'm not backing down. I'm just going to smile nicely and let you know I will beat the F out of you.
Yeah.
So I like it.
Like, I will do everything I can for my patient. I will not accept defeat without trying all of the things that I can try.
You were getting an understanding that the first 2 seasons never gave me an understanding of, and I wonder if you guys feel the same. I understand in season 3 what type of doctor Hugh Colbert is. In those first 2 seasons, I could not tell you what his medical ethics were. I couldn't tell you if he was like Crusher, if he was like the MH. I couldn't tell you, but this season I feel like he's got a mixture of Dr. Crusher and a mixture of Dr. Franklin from Babylon 5. He's kind of got those two energies.
He feels like his own person and his own doctor in this season more than he did in the other 2.
He's become clearly defined.
I think when you die and come back, I mean, I think that's going to have a very big impact on what your ethics are and where your moral stance is.
Like, people didn't give up on me, so I'm not going to give up on others.
I've died, so I know how bad it is. But yeah, I enjoyed his back and forth with Cronenberg, and I hope in the future we see them paired up more often in the show. I think they actually play off really well. I think David Cronenberg's surprisingly good actor in this. I enjoy seeing him. I hope he becomes more of a character than just a mystery box character who's like, what's he all about? Ooh, is he the Starfleet president? Ooh, I mean, Federation president? Ooh, like, I don't care about that. I just want to know who he is. I want to get a character beat on him. David Cronenberg's delivering it performance-wise, but I hope next season gives us details of characterization more.
If you'd come to me sooner, I could have saved you a lot of trouble.
I wasn't aware you had any medical training.
Yes, well, I guess I'm a man of widely varying interests.
What did you guys think of getting to see in this part? We'll get to see him a bit more in the second one, but what did you get to see about actually getting to see mirror Hugh Colbert? Because in the first season, the writers of that show deliberately did not put him in the mirror universe because they said he's too innocent to be evil.
Big fan of the eyeliner or biggest fan of the eyeliner?
I love the eyeliner.
I love seeing all their mirror counterparts. I mean, it's always fun to see them step out of the character that we know into something new. So
yeah. What did you think, Nathan? Did you actually? I mean, when that first season happened, they on purposely didn't give us Hugh Colbert in the Mirrorverse. So I personally was surprised that we got to see him in this third season because I just remember they didn't show us him. So I was like, oh, I guess he's not there, right? I guess he didn't exist or he wasn't around. But what did you think of actually getting to see Hugh Colbert in his cool medical outfit too? The Mirror Universe medical outfit's awesome.
I really liked it. And I really enjoy also how they get these characters to basically play, to chew up the scene, to be people that they're not. I liked it. I am a fan of him even more so now since he's come back from the mushroom world. So
never forget, they snapped his neck so he could live in the Spore network and rub tree bark all over himself. I'll never forget
because
that.
Of a tear.
Because of a magical teardrop. I'll never forget. None of that makes sense to me. I've listened to the writers explain it all, and I still don't get it. But, that's me. I was thrilled to see Hugh Colbert in it. Because when we were watching this show, we were doing our podcast. See, that's the difference too. When we were watching this season, this was the first season we were watching it where we were also analyzing Star Trek Discovery for our show. So we were like doing season 1, season 2. I'm listening to all the press junkets. I'm listening to all this, them explain why Hugh Colbert didn't have a character in season 1 and justify why he wasn't in the Mirror Universe by saying, see, Hugh Colbert's the emotional heart of the show, and he's too pure and innocent to be shown in the Mirrorverse, so we're never going to show him in the Mirror Universe. And I'm like, thank God that we got different showrunners, because I thought it was bullshit back then that we didn't get to see him in the Mirror Universe, and I'm happy that we actually got to see him in it this time around. And Wilson Cruz is, although in this episode he didn't get as much to do, he is chewing the scenery in a wonderful fashion. He felt like he was It felt like he learned a lot from Jason Isaacs when he worked with him in season 1, because he felt like he was honing in on what Jason Isaacs' level of campy was. While Sonequa Martin Green, she's doing like a full-on TOS style, like campy mirror universe, like over the top, like maybe DS9 as well. But Wilson Cruz, he kind of leveled it down a bit to what Jason Isaacs was kind of bringing us in season 1, which was nice to see.
It really was the desire that we never see him in the mirror universe, because we wanted to make sure that he stays, that the image of Colbert continues to stay pure.
Yeah.
And absolutely not evil. We didn't want to show that side of him. So ultimately we made the decision not to have Wilson appear in the mirror universe.
Rachel, what would you rate this episode, Terra Firma Part 1? Would you give it a yum, meaning bad, or yum yum being good?
Reluctant-ish yum yum.
Yum yum.
I am happy enough to give it a yum yum.
Yum yum.
So, Patrick, what would you give this episode, a yum or a yum yum?
Well, I liked it, so I'm going to give it a yum yum.
Yum yum.
It's very yum yum. Nathan,
It
what
was.
about you? Yum meaning bad or yum yum being good?
Oh, I'm sorry. Got the yum yum.
Yum yum.
I told you what to.
Wonderful stuff. So next episode we'll be covering part 2 with your other 2 hosts. Since you guys are a 4-hosted show, we thought it would be best to split you between the 2. So that everyone can get a moment to speak and whatever. And I'll be very keen because I know one of your other hosts is a very big Giorgio fan. So hopefully we don't rip each other's throats out as I say, Giorgio's a fascist and I don't like her. So Nathan, could you tell us all what IMDb has to say about the second part of this?
Of course. Giorgio uncovers the true depths of the plot against her, leading her to a revelation about how deeply her time on the USS Discovery truly changed her.
That'll be fun. Hopefully, I will say I personally remembered enjoying the second half a lot more than the first half on the initial watch. But who knows? Things have changed on this rewatch. It may be flipped around. It may be mirrored.
There are many jokes to be had here. If you're going to torture me, at least let me have some fun.
Starfleet Underground, guys, tell us where people can find your show. Where can people look you up and follow you on the social medias? Where are you guys at?
We're on. You can find us on StarfleetUnderground.com. That's our website, and it's the cornerstone to show where we are because we're Starfleet Under G on Twitter. We're also on Instagram, and if you have Siri or if you have Alexa, just say to play the Starfleet Underground podcast, the latest episode. We also have a Patreon. Look for us for Starfleet Underground, where you can get postcards, pictures of tribbles being neutered, as well as maybe, it may be real or not real, nude pictures of the crew. What? So there are things there. So
remember,
please,
not for kids, people. Not for kids.
No, not for kids. You don't want to pay that money anyway. And if you do,
You don't want to see the captain naked.
No. And
That's not
as
a
I
good
said,
thing.
you guys do a great job. I would definitely say for you people out there listening, if you're wanting a bit more of a positive take on Star Trek Discovery in the modern Star Trek era, these guys definitely do a good job. You always have some interesting things to say. Definitely follow them on the social media. You guys have great social media posts. I like your little videos. I like to comment on them and every now and then and be like, what about Kern? So yeah, definitely do all that. We'll have all of these in the description of this episode as usual. You can find us on the same social medias. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, all of those. YumYumPod or YumYumPodcast. We're always posting there. You can follow us on Patreon as well, YumYumPod on the Patreon, where we review other episodes of Star Trek, the best of and worst of rated episodes according to IMDb. We also talk about the Star Trek movies once a month, and we give our thoughts on other things, whether they be TV shows, video games, so on and so forth. So check us out on all of those. Do the Starfleet Underground a favor. If you're listening to them already or you're going to and you like their stuff, rate and review on all those podcatchers. Do the same for us. It's always appreciated. Always good to know the feedback from you, the listeners out there. Rachel, I think it's time to leave now. I've got to torture some people to learn my lesson.
Agonizer booths, we go.
Wait, no. Where do we stand in order to get this transporter back to our ship?
Well, you can
Where do we
stand.
stand?
You can stand on our little transporter pad, and we'll transport you out into space so that
how cool!
So that your ship can transport you in the nick of time, so that you can give them the little floppy disk of our ship's weakness.
Thank you so much. And wait, your transporter pad is a smiley face. How cool is that?
Yeah,
okay, thank you.
With a little tongue sticking out because it's going yum yum.
Nice. You ready, Pat? We're going to get back to the ship.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us on, guys.